Welcome to Just Between Uterus, the show that empowers people to take control of their health and wellness. Join us as we explore the latest research, trends, and issues from sexual and reproductive health to mental health and everything in between. We will share our knowledge and insights, and our guests will share their real life stories about their own gender specific health experiences.
Whether you're young and just starting to think about your health, a busy parent juggling work and family, an accomplished professional, or mature and navigating menopause and beyond, this podcast is for you. If you have a uterus or know someone with a uterus, this podcast is for you. Tune in each week for practical tips, inspiring stories, and a community of people who are committed to living their healthiest lives.
Created for us,
discussed by us,
for people with a uterus. The information shared on this podcast should not be used in lieu of medical or other healthcare provider advice. Please consult your provider for specific information regarding your pregnancy, postpartum, or other women's and gender-specific healthcare.
Hey, everybody. How y'all doing?
Hey, good.
Good. How are you?
Good. Those that can't see us can't see that my hair is braided today. It was not for our last episode, so I'm looking and feeling good. How are y'all?
Good. I got my hair down this episode, but it's going right back up soon as we finish.
Listen, I still got these twists in, okay, because I don't got time. I got 2 kids and my daughter pull hair, so still pull back. But yeah, y'all can get whatever edges to show up to this podcast recording is what y'all gonna get.
That's right. So, ladies, this is our second episode. So excited about that. Thank y'all for joining us. To the audience, thanks for those who listened to our first episode and learned a little bit about us. And we're so glad that you're back to hear some more. Today, we are going to talk about our birth stories, or y'all's birth stories, because I don't have one of my own. But we're going to talk about birth stories. Before we jump into the actual topic, just wanted to talk a little bit about what these birth stories look like in general, in the United States, at least. We're not going to talk about world population, but in the US, I have pulled a couple of statistics from the National Vital Statistics Report, the CDC, and found some interesting things. So in 2021, there were 3,664,292 births in this country. So more than 3.5 million babies born.
Look, and I was part of that population. Lord help us.
Hey!
And thank you, I wasn't.
What did you say, Courtney?
I said, thank you, I wasn't.
I heard that. That's a huge number, though. So if we look, that's the raw number, right? But when we think about what the rate is, there are 11 babies born per every 1,000 people in this country. So that's interesting. There are 11 babies, to every other person here every year that's born. That's pretty telling.
That's a big number, yeah.
It's a huge number.
It makes sense.
Go ahead.
No, I was gonna say it makes sense why you see everybody like on your Facebook page, like one person get pregnant, you're like, dang, all y'all having babies. Like, you know what I'm saying?
That's so true. Baby alerts, baby announcements. So when we think about how many babies are born per the population, that's one number. But the number gets even higher when you think about the number of people in their reproductive window. So for every 1,000 women who are in the reproductive age, and that's between 15 to 44, there are 56.3 births. So almost 57 births, more than 56 per every 1,000 women who are within the age that they should be able to give birth, or we typically give birth. That's a lot of babies.
Wow.
Mhm.
I didn't know the numbers was that high, especially when you hear like stuff in the media talking about how the birth rate is declining. That doesn't, well, I mean, I don't know what it was before, but that doesn't sound like a decline to me.
Well, actually, that's true. So I was gonna get to that last, but I'll just talk about it now. So yes, the birth rate is actually declining, and if you look at charts that are posted that have rates from like 2000, or I'm sorry, not 2000, the 1960s to like the early 2000s, or even up until now, 2020, you'll see that the birth rates have declined significantly. So they went up a lot after like the late 70s. So you're thinking, well, what happened around that time? Of course, there was a war going on, the Vietnam War. There were a lot of people who were against that, didn't want that happening. There was the widespread use of birth control. Of course, we had Roe v. Wade that passed. And so people had more options for whether or not, they wanted to have a child right then and there. Before, if you got pregnant, you just kind of got pregnant, there were some things you could do about it, maybe, but for the most part, widespread pregnancy termination wasn't around, and pregnancy or birth control wasn't really widely available either. And so now at the end of the 70s, you have birth control, you have legalized abortion, you have a war going on that a bunch of people don't support, so numbers drop. They start to climb back up and get really high in like the 1990s, when the teen pregnancy rate was actually the highest it's ever been. And so we started putting a lot of resources and things into talking about teen pregnancy and talking about how to prevent pregnancy. Those numbers started to decline again. They went back up around the mid 2000s, like 2006, 7-ish. But right now, they're lower than we've ever seen since we've been recording. And I mean, I think there are a number of reasons for that. One is that people are definitely having children later in life. People are getting married later in life. There's a statistic that shows 40% of the babies that are born to unmarried people. And so, there was a time not too long ago where you were married, you were living together, you had large families. And now women have the opportunity to go to college. We have careers that we didn't have the ability to have years past. And so people are putting off childbirth for a number of different reasons. And it's expensive.
I was just about to say that.
Listen.
It's expensive. So,
yes.
People are like, I don't need 10 kids. I'm gonna do these 2 and be happy.
Exactly.
That daycare
That's all I can
bill.
afford.
Exactly. That daycare bill, for one, is more than my mortgage for my home, for my single family 3-bedroom home in Virginia. Okay, we're not in the South where y'all can get land by the masses and y'all be having real nice ritzy houses. Every time Courtney show me a picture, I be like, dang friend, I can't even get listen, I have to sell a limb to get some land like that, get some property like that. But these daycare bills are just ridiculous. And it's like, I mean, I don't know how people do it. We can get back into the facts. That's why people ain't having no kids, because
that's a whole other episode in itself, because I'm basically going to work to pay the daycare. Whatever little crumbs is left over might pay a bill or 2, but yeah, daycare is expensive. So I understand why people are either putting off childbirth, later, so they're more established in their career and financially established, or choosing not to have kids at all, because it's a lot. It's a lot.
And we talk about how much birth costs too. Like, it costs $1 billion to have a baby. If you've ever looked at your EOB, even if you have insurance, if you don't have insurance, oh God. But even if you have insurance and you look at your EOB and you see how much it costs. I had 2 C-section births. The one in 2017 was like $18,000. I mean, granted, I didn't pay that, but that's what was billed. And then my birth that I had in 2021 was $30,000. And I stayed in the hospital longer with my 2017 birth. So again, it's expensive. And, even though a lot of it is covered by our insurance, if you have insurance, there's still some out-of-pocket costs that come with that. And it's ridiculous.
Oh, yeah. Well, That's I mean, it's all contributing to these lower, they're not low, but lower birth rates than what we've ever seen. The final stat that I have is the mean age at first birth. So people are having their first babies around 27 now. There was a time when it was pretty common for people to have babies between 16 to 18. Our grandparents or great grandparents were not 20 years old without having a child. My grandmother had 2, 3 by the time she was 20. So nowadays people are having children later, again, for the reasons that we already talked about. And so we just don't see people having as many kids as they did at one point.
Yeah.
And so now that leads us to my question for y'all. What is your birth story? What's your birth story?
Goodness.
Should we talk about our sons first, then the golden daughters?
oh my goodness. That second child. Listen, that's the one that had me on the go tonight, okay? We talk about the first one that lulls you into that false sense of security that you got a handle on this. I can do this. No, you can't.
But see, that for me, that was not the case. My daughter is lucky she came along, because my son took me through, I was put through the ringer with him from pregnancy to birth. He didn't really chill out until he was like 2.
I'm gonna say, how old is he now?
And by then I was already pregnant again. So she's lucky because yeah.
Well, tell us what happened.
You go first. Tell us from start to finish.
Okay, how far we starting? I mean,
so you felt the contraction. What happened?
So yes. Well, I had always like envisioned having like one kid. I was like, one, I'm gonna be good with one. That's all I can handle. That's good. But then, my husband is an only child, and shout out to the only children, but y'all are a little special. And so I'm like, I will not do that to my child. Right. So we got married in May of 2013 and got a little reckless and careless. And 3 months later, I was pregnant. It was like, oh, oops. Is it? I don't even know what.
It was that fast, really?
Yes.
I remember your wedding. That was like the wedding of the century. It was great. I did not realize it so quickly. Wow.
Yes, I was.
Girl, the top of the cake wasn't even fully frozen yet. Oh my God.
It was not. And so yeah, we I found out I was pregnant, and it was crazy because I'm like, I certainly, being a labor and delivery nurse, you see, at that point I was L&D for like 8 years, and you see so much, and I know so much, and you see so many different, ends of the spectrum, right? And so it was like, people try to get pregnant, like people purposely try to get pregnant for a long time, and I might be one of those. Who knows? No. No. So, when I found out I was pregnant, of course, it's the initial excitement. I was in tears because I'm just like, my life as I knew it was pretty much over. And that's kind of how I thought about it. Not that I, didn't want this baby or any of that, but I knew my whole life was about to change, right? And I was 30 years old, so I can't even imagine, being, a teen or, early 20s. And, that's a whole other episode, again, plug for the next episode, where we talk about what's the perfect time to have a baby. But so at 30 years old, like when I told my husband, I was in tears. Like I just was a ball of emotions. Like, what am I doing? What do you mean I am about to be somebody's mother? Like me? That don't happen to me. And so he was like excited. Like he was like, I don't know what reaction I expected, but he was like really excited. And so that kind of like calmed me down a little bit because I just didn't know how he was going to react. Not that I expected anything bad, but you know, it could have just been sad all around, right? So fast forward, I think I found out I was about 4 or 5 weeks. And now fast forward to like week 6. And it was like the nausea hit me with a ton of bricks. I was vomiting all day, every day. When I wasn't vomiting, I was nauseous. You know, that nasty metallic taste that you get in your mouth. I had that 24/7. I had these awful headaches all the time. Like I was miserable. So fast forward to my first OB appointment, I was around 9 weeks. And, you know, I got to hear his little heartbeat. Of course, I didn't know it was a boy at that point, but I got to hear his little heartbeat. And, you know, I just cried like, oh my God, this is for real. Like there's really a baby in there. Not that, you know, me throwing up every day wasn't an indication, but, you know, it just makes it real that there's like a real baby in there. But I was still nauseous. So after like hearing the heartbeat and, you know, crying because like that's my baby, then it was like, but I just want to feel better. I'm so sick. And it really was a struggle. Like, because again, my husband's the only child and he has older parents. And so he just never was around babies. Didn't really have a clue. He was completely clueless about babies. And so he didn't really get it. You know, I was sick and miserable. And, you know, he was all like trying to be all over my belly and, oh, daddy this. And I'm like, please leave me alone. Like, just please leave me alone. And so he thought I was just like the meanest person in the world. And it took him to start talking to other people because in his mind, it was like, yay, we're having a baby. Everything's great. And it, you know, that was, I guess, the picture that he created in his mind. But in reality, I was miserable, y'all. I can't even, that time was such a miserable time for me. And so fast forward, I didn't really still, like we told our family, I think I might've been about 11 weeks when we told our family, you know, we're from New Orleans. So he and I flew to New Orleans. We took our families out to lunch and, you know, told everybody that I was pregnant. And even that announcement, it was like, what, you're pregnant? And then here I am, but I'm so sick. And I remember somebody was like, you know, what really like, I think made it worse was somebody was like, you know, I couldn't have a baby for a long time. You ought to be glad you can get pregnant. You ought to be glad. That's a blessing in your belly. And that already goes through your mind, right? Yes. There's so many people that wish they could be in my position. So I should not complain. But yet I am genuinely sick. Like I can't keep food down. I'm nauseous all the time. The only time I felt good is when I was asleep. And even that was sometimes not good. I mean, it was okay. Not moving on from the horribleness.
Well,
finally, like
before you keep going, I just want to interject and make sure I say, I'm sorry that person gave that sentiment to you, because as somebody who doesn't have children, I have to be cautious what I say sometimes, what I do. And I learned that just as a labor nurse, not even as somebody who doesn't have children of my own. Just, you know, seeing people lose children, seeing people want children really bad. But even when they're pregnant, it doesn't negate the fact that they're having a hard pregnancy or this is a hard time in their life or what have you. So I just really wish we wouldn't do that.
Yeah. It was really, I don't even know if the right word is hurtful, but it was definitely traumatic because I was already feeling that guilt. And so here it is, somebody's now piling it on and telling me how I should feel. And
does it feel like I don't want to cut you off, but does it feel like, because I have my own issues with this, but it feels like you're seeing, like, right? Like you're having these thoughts in your mind and in your head, and then somebody says them and you're like they can see, like, oh my gosh, like I clearly must be putting off those vibes. And it's like you said, it's traumatic, but it makes you feel very seen.
I will never forget that conversation. So fast forward, I was around 17 weeks 17. Yes, 17. When I finally started feeling better, I finally was not vomiting every day. It was so from week 17 to week 38, it was great. My belly was growing. We even took like maternity pictures when I was around 33 weeks. Like it was great. And so fast forward now, I'm 38 weeks and I go to my 38-week check. I feel fine. And my doctor's like, yeah, your blood pressure is too high. We're going to have to send you to the hospital. Soon as she said that, tears. I'm a crier if, y'all haven't figured that out yet. But so more tears. And my husband is clueless. And so the doctor that I went to now, because, I had worked at the facility that I was going to have my baby at, I was able to choose and, I could see which doctors I liked, which ones that I would like pray never to touch me. So I had chose a doctor based on that, but she had 3 other doctors in her office. Two other doctors in her office, and they make you see everybody at least one time so that whoever's on call when you go into labor, you've at least met them before.
Right.
And so just so happened, one of them, so of course I know my doctor, that's who I picked. And then one of her partners I had also worked with, so I knew her and she knew me. But the third lady I had never met. And just so happened, that's who I had that day. And so I'm crying. So now she's explaining in full detail what all of this means. We're going to go to the hospital. You're going to get some labs drawn. We're just going to watch your blood pressure. And if everything's fine, you're going to get to go home. Well, so I'm letting her talk. And so I, getting dressed and coming out of the room. And I guess her nurse must have told her like who I was. And she was like, now, wait a minute, you're a labor delivery nurse. Why did you let me explain all of that to you? And you know exactly what I was saying. But she was joking. It wasn't. But I'm like, I needed my husband to hear it because it's hard being the patient,
Mm-hmm.
but I also know what's happening, but I also have to explain it to you now too.
Yes.
So, I needed my
That's
husband
another
to hear
episode. That's an episode right there.
Plug for the next episodes, right? So we end up going to the hospital and just like we came in separate cars because we were both coming from work to this appointment. And so we were in separate cars. And so I was like, okay, listen, yeah, we got to go to the hospital, but I'm about to stop and get me something to eat because they're not going to feed me and I'm hungry. So we stopped at Chipotle to get something to eat. And my husband is ordering as if we're about to sit down and have dinner for the evening. And I'm like, dude, what? Like, what? We got to go to the hospital. He was like, oh, I thought she meant like tomorrow. Like, when did you hear tomorrow? Like, what are you talking about? So we get the food to go. We show up to the hospital. And again, I had worked at this hospital. So, I'm seeing, soon as I walk in, my last name before marriage was Lomax. So as soon as I walk in, everybody's like, Lomax, hey girl, oh, look at you and your belly. And again, I'm like, I don't want to be here. So I'm just crying the whole way, getting checked in, crying the whole way there. And so this was another thing, the blood pressure cuff. And Tiffany, you'll know. So they put the blood pressure cuff on. And so it's, inflating and squeezing my arm. And then it starts to deflate. Well, then it reinflates. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, oh, Lord, that means my pressure's high. So my nurse was like, no, that doesn't mean that. Just relax. I'm like, I used to work here. Yes, it does. I know what I'm talking about. And so like my pressure was like 208 over 114. Like it was ridiculous, but I felt completely fine. Like, I mean, I had some swelling, but I was fine. So of course they couldn't let me go home and they did all the things. And like my urine came back with protein, my blood pressure was high. So here I am crying again because I already know like what's coming next. And so I tell my husband, I'm like, listen, call my mom and tell her if she's coming, because she's still in New Orleans, we're in Dallas. So I'm like, if she's coming, she needs to make arrangements and get here. So he goes out and he comes back. And I was like, what did my mom say? He was like, oh yeah, she said, just keep her posted. And I'm like, keep her posted? I'm like, what did you tell her? And he was like, I just told her we're at the hospital and they're watching you. I'm like, dude, I am not going home, okay?
Yeah.
I am not going home. And he was like, oh, so it's official? I'm like, they haven't officially given the order yet, but I am not going home. Like, tell her to come if she's coming. So he was
and
still
you better
just
hope
not
I don't
getting
stroke
it.
out.
Right.
Right.
So, I had to, that was like a Thursday night. So we did Cervidil, which helps to soften the cervix, all night Thursday night. And then we did Pitocin starting that Friday morning. And I was adamant that I did not want a C-section. And I also did not want to be rushed. Yes, my blood pressure was high, but I'm in the hospital. We're monitoring it. We're monitoring me. We're monitoring my baby. And as long as both of us are fine, we're going to take our time. I'm not going to be rushed with this induction. Mm-hmm. And 2 days. He wasn't born until Saturday morning. And I also had to be on magnesium sulfate, which is a drug to help relax your muscles to prevent seizures.
Yep.
And so with that medication, it just makes you hot and cold all at the same time. Like, I am freezing, but my armpits are on fire. Like, I am freezing, but like my pelvis is on fire. Like, what is this? If I take the cover off, I'm freezing, but if I put it on, I'm hot. And it just had me so groggy, and it was miserable. It was really a miserable process for me. And I just remember like trying to sleep and like apologizing in my head to every patient I've ever given that to. Like, I'm so sorry, y'all. I didn't know. I'm sorry. And so finally, he was born. I did have him vaginally, and we did not find out what the gender was until he was born. And I really wanted a boy. And it's so funny because my sister was there recording, right? So the recording is like she has everything. And so it's at one moment, like nothing is happening. And she's just like panned in on my vagina. And I'm just like, damn, it's like you couldn't have panned the room or something. Like, I mean, it is there for a good 3 minutes. Nothing. That's it. That's all that's in frame. And so finally he comes out, and, I remember like, my mom was like, well, what is it? And then my husband was like, it's a boy. And I was like, it's a boy. Oh my gosh. And so, everybody's all excited. It's a boy. But then looking back at the video, she must have pressed a button or something, because none of that was even on the video. Like, she missed it, started taking still pictures when we found out, he was a boy. And so then the next video, he's like on the warmer with the NICU team checking him out. And they only had the NICU team there because he was 38 weeks and because of the magnesium sulfate. But he was fine, and, everything was all good. I had to stay on MAG for another 24 hours. Mm-hmm. And I had an extra day in the hospital, and that was his birth story. Sorry, that was a long story, but
no.
He was definitely I thought, everybody gets like surprised the first day, right? This baby sleeps. Oh, he's so good. Look at, he's just sleeping. Oh, look at him. Oh, but that night too. Oh, Lord.
Yes.
Oh,
listen.
And my son was a really hard baby. Like, I could not put him down. Baby wearing is life. Let me tell you, because he never wanted to be put down. I couldn't figure out feeding. Like, it was just, he was definitely a tough baby. But that was my birth story with my son.
Okay.
Tell us the second one, because I have, it's funny because I've known you for, I can't match them at, but it's been a long time, maybe like 5-6 years, like 6 years, because DJ is almost 6. Tell us the second one. And I'm saying that because your birth stories were completely different. Like, the whole setup was different. And I love this for you. So tell us about the second one.
Completely different. Okay, so fast forward 2 years later. Well, actually not even 2 years later. I think Amanda got pregnant. He's around 16, 17 months, somewhere in there. And well, even before I got pregnant, I knew, we actually planned this one. My son was an accident. Don't tell him that. If you're listening, I mean, he's 9, so
surprise. He was a surprise.
Yes, he was a
man.
He was a welcome surprise. But my daughter, we actually planned. And so I was telling, before I even got pregnant, I told my husband I wanted a home birth. And he was like, a what now? And he was like, a home birth. He was like, what you mean home? Like this home here? No, absolutely not. And so I was like, okay, well, at least the birth center. I do not want to be back in the hospital. I do not want to give birth like that again. Like, so the birth center was a compromise. So before I even got pregnant, we went and toured. He had no clue, just no clue what it was. So I'm like, okay, let's go tour one so you can see it. And that will hopefully make you a little bit more comfortable. So we went and toured one, and, he saw it and he was like, oh, okay, so they have the same equipment as a hospital and same, like, oh, okay, yeah, this might be cool. So fast forward, again, seeing all the people that might have trouble getting pregnant, and like, we'll just see what happens. Got my IUD out in September. I was pregnant in October. And so it was like, okay, here we go. So, but I was still on the fence. Again, labor and delivery nurse, like, I see too much, I know too much. What if I get one contraction and I'm like, because I had an epidural pretty early with my son. And, I didn't want to waste anybody's time. And so so it was finally like January when I called the birth center that I wanted to go to, like, hey, I'm due in August, and they're like, oh, sorry, we're full. I'm like, full? It's January. I said August. Like, yeah, I'm sorry, we're full. I'm like, geez, do people like pee on a stick and call you the second they get a result? So I had to find a different birth center, which ended up, still being a good experience. So all throughout my pregnancy, everything's all good. I had maybe like one day of nausea with that pregnancy. And like, no, it was just a dream pregnancy considering like what I had went through with my son. I wasn't sick at all, like didn't throw up the whole pregnancy. Like it was just completely different. And so all through, prenatal care, everything is great. We get to 36 weeks and she was like, your blood pressure's a little higher. I'm like, oh gosh, here we go again. So she was like, well, let's just watch it. We'll see what it is next week. So we get to 37 weeks and it's a little bit higher. I'm like, oh, please. Like, I do not want that induction again. And so at 38 weeks, no. In between, she had me do like some 24-hour urines. That came back fine. So she was okay to like let me, just kind of relax at home, chill to try to get my blood pressure under control. So 38 weeks and my blood pressure's even higher. And so at this point, she's like, well, let's just see if we can strip your membranes, give you a little bit of side attack to see if we can get some contractions going. And I was like real leery about the side attack, another episode. But I did let her strip my membranes. And so that did get me contracting a little bit. But after like 2 or 3 days, contractions just stopped. Like contractions stopped. I was also monitoring my blood pressures at home and my blood pressures were fine. So I called her and I was like, hey, look, my blood pressure's been good these last couple of days. I don't really feel no more contractions. Like, let me chill, right? Let's see what's going to happen. So we ended up having another appointment, like maybe 2 or 3 days later, and my blood pressure was high again. And so she was like, listen, we can't keep continuing this. I'm good to let you go another couple days, but let's go ahead and schedule your induction. So my induction was scheduled like a Tuesday morning. I was supposed to show up at the hospital at 8 a.m. And by this point, I was crying because I wasn't going to get the birth experience that I wanted. Well, thankfully, my daughter, she helped me out because like around midnight the night before, contractions woke me up out of my sleep. And she, natural birth was definitely an experience. I remember like everybody kept talking about the water epidural, get in the water, like the water makes you feel so good. And so my husband drew this bath and I'm like waiting for the bath to be filled up so I can just get in it and so I can not feel whatever is happening. And I got in that water. They lied.
Get somebody else to do it. Somebody else to do it.
Yes, please. Because no, this not it. And so in my head, I'm like, okay, we need to go. Where are you going though? Like, where are you going that you're not going to feel this? Because like it wasn't to the hospital, right? So we, our bedroom was upstairs. I still have to get dressed. I have to make it downstairs. So that in itself took like an hour just to like make it down the stairs and in the car. I swear it felt like my husband was driving backwards. I'm like, are we there yet? That was the worst part of it. Just not being able, like having all those contractions and not being able to move was like, oh my God, like that was the worst. And so, I just remember praying, like, and I will always say and swear, like, me and God have never been closer until I was in that moment. Like, I felt like every time I said, God, please, I just need a break, I got one. Like, I really did. I really do believe I got a break from the contractions. But then, like, we pulled up at the birth center. We beat the midwife there. So now we're having to wait on the midwife. And I'm like, yo, I just got to get out of this car. I've got to get out of this car. And I opened the door. Keep in mind, this is August in Texas. Even at 2 a.m., I opened that door and that heat hit me. And I was like, oh, wait, no. I'm like, where is she? And I was like, God, I just need another break, please, God. And like, I really did feel like God was talking to me because he said, well, how long do you want? And I was like, I just need like 10 minutes. He was like, well, 10 minutes, that's not going to get your baby out. Like, how about 2? And I was like, okay, I'll take it. Like, we had this whole conversation, me and God. We had this whole conversation. And so I got a little bit of a break. And then I had to pee. And mind you, the midwife is still not there. Y'all, my husband took off his shirt and gave me his shirt. And I peed in his shirt like a little diaper. It was bad. It was just bad. So finally she shows up. And then she's like, oh my God, I left the key at home. What? Like, what is going on here? So here I am, like, screaming in the middle of the night because, like, these contractions are coming and they hurt. So finally she remembered that she had a spare key hidden somewhere in the bushes or something. And so we finally get in. Now, here's another funny thing. We had hired a birth photographer. There was this woman in the room. I didn't know who she was. I didn't even care. Like, that's just like, I didn't even care who she was, but I kept seeing this woman in the corner. Now, we had taken maternity pictures with the birth photographer. So, like, I met her. Like, I knew I met her. But in the middle of all of that, I just couldn't. Shit, that was the birth photographer. Like, finally, she started snapping pictures. And I'm like, oh, that's who that is. Okay. I know her. So the midwife checked me and I was 7 centimeters. And then she checked my blood pressure and she was like, oh no, Courtney, you cannot stay here. Your blood pressure is too high. We got to get to the hospital. And so I didn't even bother asking her what it was because I was like, yes, tell them I'm coming. How long before I can get an epidural? Please, like, please, I need something, right? And so I got up to get dressed and I had one more contraction and it was like, oh, gotta push. And like, I mean, it was literally this uncontrollable urge to push. And I ended up laying back on the bed. I might have pushed like twice and she was born. So it was great. Like it was really, it was amazing. Like it was amazing. I'm not planning on any more kids, but if I ever did, I will, 1, fight for my home birth. 2, bare minimum, it would be birth center. But it was truly amazing. Like, yes, all the contractions, but after it's immediately over, sorry if y'all hear my kids. The contractions, it was immediately over. I felt like I could fly. Like I felt good. It's a high that I wish I could experience like once a year. I don't want that many babies. But I just was floating. Like it was just so, it was amazing. And again, we didn't find out the gender. So I remember my husband looking like, it's a girl. Oh. But yeah, she was definitely an easier baby. I could at least put her down for like 20 minutes. Oh, but when that 3-nager hit. Oh, she's almost 7 now and still same exact personality. But
No.
that was my birth stories. But it was so great at the birth center because she was born by 3 a.m. I was back home in my own bed by 8 a.m. It was great. It's great.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, Nichelle, what about your birth story?
Oh my gosh. So I have 2 kids as well, guys. So as much as I would love to have had some of the amazing birth situations that Courtney has had, I have had like the textbook tragic, traumatic birth. So when Courtney was talking about getting pregnant, and this is like just in our friendship, having these conversations, and I kind of get to the point where, like, with my second child, Courtney was like my coach, like she was like my doula from afar, like, girl, no, or girl, yes. So my husband and I, the first time I was pregnant was in 2014, and it was right before I was in the Navy. I was about to switch duty stations, and something wasn't feeling right. I had these pains and stuff, and I had always had painful periods, but I just didn't know. And so I went to the doctor, and I was having a miscarriage is what was happening. No idea. I just thought, like, okay, I didn't have my period for a while and I was in pain, and then like I had it, but like, whoa, this is looking like a lot. At this point I was 25. And I felt like I had a good grip on my body, but I had no idea what was happening down there. I was like, this ain't it. And so I was having a miscarriage. And so I was like, oh, and I had always wanted kids. And I was like, I'm going to wait until I find the one, right? And then I found the one, and I was like, well, wait a minute, hold on now. We got a little bit of money. We can, okay, hold on now. I got no kids going to eat into this. We going out to dinner. Me and the one might chill for a little bit. And so I was like, okay. And I found out I was having a miscarriage. That situation, so a couple years go by. Me and my husband both in the military, having, duty issues, not being in the same geographical location, all that good stuff. So 2016 rolls around, and I found out I'm pregnant again. Complete surprise. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, this is crazy. This is great. Like, we had a little bit of time. We good. So I was in the military. If you're military, you know that every duty station or location doesn't necessarily have a clinic or a hospital that is capable to handle pregnant people.
Yep.
So we had a clinic there, and they were like, the only thing we can do for you is a piss test. Like, you have to, sorry, it's a little vulgar, pee on a stick. You have to go to the hospital, Naval Medical Center, Portsmouth, right outside of Chesapeake, to get any sort of maternity care. We can't transfer you to another clinic because your duty station says that you're here, so you'll have to go to the hospital. So I said, great. So I called a hospital, and they were like, oh, it's a lot of pregnant people. We backed up. So we're going to get you an appointment in May. At this point, I was pregnant in February. They're like, sorry, it's first available. You're going to have to take it. I don't know what to do. Keep peeing on the stick. Come into the ER if something goes crazy. So I said, okay. Wow. So everything was good. I know. And so at the time that I would have had this appointment, should have been 12 weeks. 12 weeks with no maternity care. And so, but I didn't know. I was like, okay. So going about my business, they say, unless you start feeling pain, cramping, or severe bleeding, come into the ER. So cool. Life is life. I'm doing my thing. I'm, feeling kind of days going. So the night before we were supposed to go to this appointment, I will never forget, we were watching The Revenant, and I went to go pee, and I had some spotting, and I freaked out. And my husband's like, no, they said. So we call, and, nurse line's like, no, you're fine. Spotting is normal. This, that, and the third. It's pink. Oh my gosh. Okay. And they say she go away. So it took about 12 hours, and it finally went away. When I woke up to go to the appointment the next day, I wasn't having any more spotting. So I said, okay. So I go to this appointment. I'll never forget what I had on, where we part, like everything about this. And we get into this appointment, and I'm meeting a doctor I've never met before. It's a hospital. And they take me back there, and I explained to them that I had some spotting the night before, but it seemed okay. It was like 8 a.m. at this point. And the nurse goes to do the ultrasound. I will never forget this as long as I live. And she hooks the thing up. She's doing the thing. And she says, she puts the ultrasound on my belly. And whatever. Cool bean. She puts that away. She goes to get the wand. Okay. I don't really know the difference at this point. I'm just like, okay, I didn't know they stuck anything in your vagina. She's like, yeah, no, don't worry about it. So she wands me, and she says, and that's for those who don't know, that's an ultrasound they put inside of your vagina and to view your uterus. And she says, well, I see something, but I'm not sure it's a baby. And now I've had a positive pregnancy test. So I'm like, what? And so she's like, well, you may just be very early. And I knew my body at this point. Like, I hadn't had a period in weeks. And so I was like, no, it should be 12 weeks. And she was like, you're definitely not 12 weeks pregnant. And so my husband immediately asked her to go get the doctor. Like, I am beside myself. So the doctor comes in and gives me the news that there's nothing inside of my uterus. There was no fetus, at least. And so I'm probably going to have a miscarriage. They can see that there may have been something in there, but cool beans. And so we say, okay, well, what's the next steps? And they say, we're going to send you home to pass it on your own. I would go home and I would have one of the most traumatic miscarriages I've ever had in my life. It was just so tragic. So that situation, I'm telling that because it's a part of my birth story, that triggers me into this mental state of like, all my life, I thought that I would be able to have a baby when I wanted to. Mm-hmm. And now I'm here and I want to have a baby and I can't. Like, nobody told me that there would ever be a chance that I could not do this. This is what my body was made for. I have a uterus, I have ovaries, like babies. That's what happens. Sperm, egg, boom. So I go into this really dark mental place and I am hell-bent on having a baby. So now we're trying to have a baby. There was no plan for him. Like, I came up with this in my mind, and I would go from that was May for a year and not just trying to conceive every month, doing the things, peeing on the sticks. So finally, my baby would have been due in November 29th, to be exact. So that passes, that happens, and I'm just emotionally distressed. And I say, Lord, listen, if this is the last month, this is the last pack of ovulation kits. If I don't get pregnant this time, I'm done. I'm over it. Like, I need a break. Mm-hmm. And that was in January. And then a few weeks later, peed on a stick, and I was pregnant with my son. Didn't know he was a son at that time. Completely scared, fearful. So I went through the whole pregnancy very fearful of a miscarriage, watching my symptoms. Oh my God, am I feeling pregnant today? Am I not feeling pregnant today? Like, all this fear. I carried it with me the whole time. So we got to about 4 months. We saw his little heartbeat. It was beautiful. My husband sobbed like a baby. It was beautiful. I wish I would have got on camera. And we said we didn't want to know, the sex or the gender. And so, cool beans, we're going on about our lives. At about 4 months, I have this pain. It feels like I'm having a heart attack. And I'm not a hospital goer to it. Like, I will just stay at home and like thug it out. And so my husband was like, you okay? And I was like, I need to go to the hospital. I thought I was having a heart attack. I'm in the car. I'm on my knees in the front seat, like leaning on the seat while he's driving, butt to like the glove box. We get to the hospital and they take me in there. He tells them I'm pregnant, tells them I have a history of, miscarriages. They take me back there. They say, okay, well, no, the baby's fine. I thought I was having something, had a heart attack, miscarriage, something. Turns out I had gallstones. Mm-hmm. So,
they'll make you feel like you're dying. I know.
Listen, they was like, bring in the morphine. And I was like, my husband was like, well, wait a minute, can that affect me? I don't care. Like, at this point, I was like, I don't care. Just give me the drugs. This is the worst. I'm throwing up everywhere. I felt like I was about to pass out. So in that pregnancy, I realized that I had gallstones and I would have them for the rest of my pregnancy. So much so that I then, from that point on, couldn't really keep anything down. And I lost about 30 pounds in my pregnancy. I was 30 pounds below what I weighed before I got pregnant. Wow. By the time I gave birth. And so I had this doctor and she was sweet enough, but her bedside manner was just trash. And so she just kept saying, like, don't eat the fries. And I'm like, ma'am, I can't eat anything. So fearful, but we get all the way to 40 weeks. And at this point they were like, well, you have a history of miscarriage. So let's just bring you in there checking you. So cool beans, I'm doing the stuff. They label me high risk. I'm Black. I'm overweight. I got all the things. So I'm going to see my doctor every week at this, probably from around 20 weeks on. So we go in. They say, listen, you're supposed to be due next week. You're 40 weeks. Let's just schedule you for an induction. I don't know no better. I'm dumb. I'm like, okay, I want to get this baby out. I got gallstones. I'm throwing up. Can't keep anything down. I'm losing. I can't hold my own bodily function. Like I'm pooping on myself. Like, it's just so weird. And I never thought that this is what pregnancy was going to be like. I was like, this is very, like, this is the pits. I hate it. And I kind of went through the same thing with Courtney. We attended a large church and my pregnancy was miserable with him. And I remember somebody saying the exact same thing to me. We were in Sunday school and the girl was like, but you prayed for this. You prayed for this. You had asked people to like pray for you guys to have a baby. And so like, suck it out, buttercup. And again, I felt so seen because I'm like, yes, but nobody told me that this could happen. Like half of y'all never had this happen to y'all. So how could y'all know to tell me? But like, that's still valid, right? So go on to have this baby. I get induced. My son was born the week of Thanksgiving, and you two are both labor and delivery nurses, so you already know what that means. My doctor was like, "Yeah, let's get her in there." Boom. So they brought me in. I would go on to be my doctor's 11th C-section of the day, or within a 24-hour span. He was born the morning. So the week of Thanksgiving, he was born that Monday morning, or that Monday. No, that Monday night. Sorry. So they brought me in. She had other patients that were there, and I got side attack, which I affectionately call devil's piss, because that's what it feels like when it's going up in there. And so I went from nothing to 2 rounds of side attack, and literally my contractions were on top of each other, like on top of each other. I remember one point I had to pee. I get up out of the bed, they, do the monitors, and I have this monitor, you can move around. I get halfway through the floor, and I'm holding on to my bag of fluids, and I'm like, oh my God. I told my husband, come here. I had to literally stand there, have the contraction, scoot to the bathroom and pee, have another contraction while I'm on the toilet, and then like hurry up and run back to the bed before I had another one. And my doctor was in surgery, so they couldn't get the go ahead and give me an epidural. So I had to wait. That process took about an hour, and the nurse finally called it and said, we got to give her something. Like, we have to. I'm gonna ask for forgiveness later. So thank God for my nurse, Kayla. She was a godsend. She was like, you can't keep doing this. Like, she's gonna die. Like, and not in a die because of birth, but like, she's not gonna make it. She's gonna pass out. So they give me an epidural. My doctor finally comes out of surgery. Nothing's going. They finally break my water, which wasn't broken at the time. They break my water, and there's meconium in it. So boom, things change. They're like, yeah, we about to have a baby. And we're like, oh, okay. When? Like, in a couple hours. And I was like, it takes them 15 minutes to clean the OR, so we'll see you in 15 minutes. It's like, okay, wow. And I had an epidural at the time. My anesthesiologist was so in love with this man. He's the best person ever. After that, it was like this high. So I don't know. People always tell me epidurals make them loopy, but I felt like I was like high on drugs. Like, this is nice. So in this period that they're prepping me for the C-section, or I'm sorry, they're like, you're going to have a C-section. So I'm like, cool. Now, mind you, I told you I had issues with infertility, so I wasn't fighting for that vaginal birth. I was just like, I came here to get a baby, and I don't care how you get this baby out healthy and alive. I don't care if you have to take him out or take this baby out of my nose. Get it out and get it out safely. I don't care what you tell me to do. Sure. Yeah, you want me to open up my earlobe? I'll take it. And so they're prepping me, and my son's heart rate starts to decelerate. Now, that was happening a little bit before they stripped the membranes. I mean, stripped my bag, but still, they were watching it. So things start to change for the worse. His heartbeat's decelerating. My heartbeat is decelerating. So they rushed me down to the operating room, and within 3 minutes, my son was out. Well, I told you guys I'm married. My husband didn't even make it to the OR. He was standing outside, and they made a call, and they took my son out, and we didn't know what he was. And so, I had the spinal, I was loopy, and my vision was like, it'd be like, the Lion King, I push him out and they hold him up, and it's a boy. Like, that was going to happen for me. I just knew it. And when I was so loopy, it was just me and the nurse, and she was very sweet. The OR nurse was very sweet, keeping me warm. And I don't know what I was doing. I might have had some mag, because I was freaking out. I was saying stuff out loud that I thought I was saying in my head, and saying stuff in my head that I thought I was saying out loud. And so I know he's out because I hear one cry. He just cries one time, and he doesn't cry again. Mind you, I'm loopy, so who knows? And then my husband busts into the OR, and they finally bring him in, and he's like, "Baby, are you okay?" And he said that I'm wide open, like they deep up in my belly. And I'm like, So I was like, I can be down for all I know. He was like, "Ma'am, what?" And so at that very moment, the nurse comes over and says, "Would you like to meet your son?" And I'm like, well, this is anticlimactic. Like, and so he goes and with the baby, and it was a great experience after that. I cried, I sobbed, everything was great. Those drugs really had me out bad, because I don't remember anything. So like 2:00 the next morning, he was born at like 8 p.m. So that happened. I had that C-section. My doctor gave me staples afterwards. I don't know. I was straight out the Navy, peak of fitness at that point. I don't know why I got staples, but whatever. So that was my birth story with my son. It was, the whole breastfeeding stuff. We'll kind of go on to talk about that. Another episode, but that was kind of like my birth story with him. And I felt like I got what I came for. Like, I came for a baby, and I left with a baby, no matter all that other stuff that happened. it would take me years to process it. So my kids are 4 years apart. It would take me years to process what happened to me, to talk to other people, to meet Courtney. And we would have these conversations about like, okay, you're a labor and delivery nurse. And I'd be telling her stuff. And she was like, like, oh God, And so, therapy, I had postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety. My therapist really thinks I had like episodes of postpartum psychosis. But this happened before I met her. And so I would go on to get pregnant again in 2021. Now, my daughter was a complete and utter surprise, was not planning on that. 3 months before I got pregnant with her, I actually had an ectopic rupture. I had an ectopic pregnancy and my fallopian tube ruptured. It was the scariest thing I've ever experienced in my life. I was bleeding internally. I didn't know I was bleeding internally. I told y'all I don't like to go to the hospital, but I remember, messaging Courtney in our group chat being like, y'all think I'm going to the hospital today? And she was just like, yeah, you need, like, I was like, I can't stand. I was coming down the stairs and I can't stand up to make DJ breakfast.
Get off
she was
the
like,
internet.
go to the hospital.
Get off my phone.
Get out the group chat and go to the hospital.
And go to the hospital.
And it was 2021, so COVID was still happening. So the ERs had rules, and she was like, have your husband take you to the hospital. And so I got this grand idea. I was going to drive myself, Tiffany, when I was sitting there bleeding internally and in pain. And I drove myself to the hospital like an idiot.
Man.
But it didn't. I know. But it didn't matter because when I got to the ER, it could only be one person. And our son was 3 at the time. And so they were like, you can't bring him in. So my husband couldn't have came anyway. So I had this ectopic rupture. And at this point, I had decided that I wasn't trying to get pregnant. I needed some hardcore birth control because I wasn't doing this again. I was fine with where I was. And so had the rupture, got out. My OB at the time, Black male doctors, phenomenal, chef's kiss, shout out to Derwin. And he said, okay, listen, you come for your post-surgery follow-up and we'll get you some birth control. So we do that. So he gives me some hormonal birth control to resolve the ectopic that he had given me methotrexate, which is a chemotherapeutic drug. And so they said, listen, you can't get pregnant again because it's going to affect the cell growth of whatever fetus, you need 90 days. So I said, okay. So I go and 90 days happens. I'm taking this hormonal birth control pills and I had issues with birth control before not working. And so all my friends was like, you sure? I'm like, yeah, y'all, it'll be fine. I was going to go back and get an implant. I go back to get the implant and they push it back a little bit. I got my COVID vaccine and I'm texting Courtney and her friend Allison. And I'm like, man, I got my COVID vaccine the other day. I'm still on the couch. So this joint really take you out. Like, I ain't know it was like this. And so it was like, well, what's wrong with you? It was like, man, I'm nauseous. My head hurt. Like, I really don't feel good. Maybe it's the flu. And Courtney and Allison both. Allison's an attorney. Was like, it's not the flu. Please go pee on the stick. It's like, yeah, I'm on the birth control. Okay, I know, but no. And I go pee on the stick and bam, 2 lines. And I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. So I said, okay, you know what? I'm gonna wait it out. My birthday is the end of April. I said, this was like in March. I said, I'm gonna wait it out. And, I've had miscarriages before. I have been pregnant 11 times and I only have 2 live births. And so I was like, I'm gonna wait it out. And if I have a miscarriage, I'll just have a miscarriage, whatever. And if not, I'll set this appointment for late April. I'll set it for 2 days before my birthday. That way, if it's a miscarriage or I'm not going to carry the baby, I have time to be blown and then be over it and have a great time on my birthday. So I'm going to this doctor's office and I'm like, yeah, I tell them the story. What happened? They say, okay, we'll take you back. I have a history of miscarriages. My OB tells them to ultrasound me. It's still early, but please, wand her vag because we already know how her body works. And so I go in there and she's doing the thing and she's, the nurse, oh, okay. And I'm like, and I can see that there's something in there. So I'm like, what? And I'm like, 5 weeks. And she's like, ma'am, your baby has a heartbeat. You're 8 weeks pregnant. It's like, I'm sorry, what? Like, no. And so we just kind of wrote it out. Like me and my friends, I was like, every 3 weeks, I was like, I'm still pregnant. This is crazy. Every time I would go to the doctor, I'm like, yeah, I'm still pregnant. This is wild. And my pregnancy with my daughter, I did have hyperemesis. It's severe morning sickness, hormonal imbalance. I had it all the way up until I gave birth to her with another repeat C-section. And so my pregnancy with her was awful. I mean, horrendous. Like my friends would text me every few days and be like, you still alive? Like, you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm just laying on the bathroom floor, throwing up again. It's okay. That's what we do every day. I had to step out of work early. I was going to work all the way up until the end of my pregnancy because I had a kid before. Like, we've done this before. About 6 months, I was like, yeah, no, I'm not taking any more clients. I need to lay down. And so with my daughter, I was a little bit smarter, right? I knew the breastfeeding stuff that I wanted to do. I just was ready. So I had a doula, I had a birth doula and a postpartum doula. And I was going to go for VBAC and I wanted no drugs. Well, my daughter, if you know her, she's herself. Okay. So she was on her own program. Um, the sickness just got the best of me. So with her, I lost 40 pounds. And there started, yeah, girl, it was crazy. I was going in there every week, less than I was the week before. And my doctor kind of got to the point, was like, all right, listen, like we can't keep doing this. And she was measuring fine. So my son was born 6 pounds and she would end up being born 8 pounds, 1 ounce. And I remember, my doctor was like, we can't keep like your baby's measuring fine. They sent me the high risk ultrasounds and stuff because it just didn't make sense. Like you keep losing weight and like this baby is growing fine. So you're eating something, but everything, I guess, whatever. The body's amazing. And so I would go in to have her. She was born the week before Christmas. I kind of got to a point and me and Courtney had this conversation. Courtney was like, just hold on. Just hold on. Like, I promise you can push her out. And I was like, Courtney, I haven't eaten in 3 weeks. I'm so tired. All I eat is applesauce and water. Please help me. And so me and my husband made the decision that we were going to do, cesarean. And this was completely different though. So I had a birth doula. I walked to the OR instead of being rushed with my son. I walked to the OR. I got to sit there and get my little spinal. I laid down and, I told him, I was like, you cannot start cutting until my husband is in the room. And we knew what our daughter was, but they said, okay, they brought him in the room. They were playing Beyonce. The nurse asked me, like, do you want to listen to anything? I was like, no. And I was like, actually Beyonce. So they were playing Beyonce. And when my daughter came into this world, Black Parade by Beyonce was playing. It was so amazing. My doula, last minute, the hospital changed their policy. She couldn't come in. But she lives on like another side of town. She drove to like the local Starbucks and because I had to be there at 4 a.m. So they opened at 5 and she sat there and like coached me and my husband through the whole thing up until obviously they were going to actual surgery. And it was beautiful. My daughter came out and they handed her over to the drapes was clear. With my son, they were blue. They had the clear drapes. They bring her out. They lay her on my chest. She does the breast crawl for breastfeeding. It was great. Everything was good. And that was kind of like my redemption story. And then, of course, I get her home and she's herself now. But the birthing experience was just so different. I felt like even though I had 2 hospital births, 2 medicalized births, like the second one, that the choices were mine and mine alone, me and my husband, you know what I mean? Like we really got to say like, yes to this, no to this. I was like, okay, if I'm going to go do it, like I would like this to happen. I would like that. I want the clear drapes. I want this. I want the breast crawl. If I can't hold her on my chest, I would like the nurse to hold her on my chest if my husband, can't do so. We did rooming in. We did all the things and like there was conversations that were had. I feel like my first birth, it was just kind of like, this is what you need to do. Go do it. And I was just like, okay. But the second time around, I was just like, okay, can I get because they had stripped my membranes, nothing was happening. She was really, really high up still when they took her. But, even the process of a VBAC, because a lot of people will not let you do a VBAC. It had been 4 years and my doctor had agreed to it. He's younger. I'm 36, so he's like around my age. And he was newer to the practice. He was so fresh and green. So he's like, yeah, you could do a VBAC. Why not? Of course, put you in the calculator. You're great. But the practice in and of itself had went to a no VBAC policy. And so even in that, yeah, girl, they had no VBAC policy. It was just crazy. And like how you have to meet the other providers. Like every time I would meet a new provider that wasn't in on the little secret, because my doctor and his dad are in the same practice. So him and his dad was in on it. But the other providers was like, why does it say VBAC? Why is your C-section not scheduled yet? And I'm like, oh, I don't know. And me, like I'm just out here skipping appointments and stuff. And I'm like, I'm helping you. I got to meet a new provider. Like, no.
You have no idea how much I rolled my eyes every time you went to the doctor at this no VBAC policy. Crazy.
It was so crazy. And we kind of got all the way up, but yeah, if I don't want to have another child, but if I do have another child, I'm definitely just gonna stay at home and push it out, because at this point, like I know I feel so confident in my body and I'm not living with that fear and stuff. So those are my 2 little crazy birth stories. Yeah.
I'm glad that both of you ladies had a second birth story that was different than your first, and one that gave you, well, at least for me, I felt like it gave me hope. Because a lot of times we do hear about these great birth stories, but those of us who work in the field, we know that's not always the case. And so to hear that your first birth wasn't, what you would have wanted it to be, in both situations. And then the second time around, even though you ended up, Nichelle, with a C-section again, it still was something that you felt in control of. And it sounded like you felt empowered to, you know, make decisions for yourself. And I love that. I think that's
it's definitely you know, amazing that we both got, although we had two different birth experiences, it was still that redemption story, you know, getting the second time around. Because even as a labor and delivery nurse, and again, you know, when my son was, you know, I was pregnant with my son, I had been a labor and delivery nurse 8 years. I know too much. I see too much. I'm just going to go to the hospital and have a doctor and do this and we'll see. I mean, I still knew enough to say, nope, you're not going to do that. Nope, we're not doing that. Okay, yeah, we'll do that. This is what I want. But, you know, then to make the choice the second time to just do it completely different and completely on my terms. I think I went a little overboard because I probably should have been induced long before she was born with my blood pressures. But, you know, yeah, it definitely feels amazing to get the birth that you want and truly the birth that you need, right? Like you needed to have your daughter that way. And it still was redemptive for you. I needed to have mine the way I had mine. And so even, you know, one birth story doesn't always determine the next. You can make different choices. You can make the same choices, but I think what's important and for people giving birth to feel empowered is that they have choice. And so, you know, it's horrible when we hear all these stories where people's choices are taken from them or made for them. You're not given all of their options. And so it can be it is really amazing when you have choices. That's it. Choice. Your situation may dictate, but at least you feel comfortable and confident in your decision that I made this decision based on the information that was given, based on facts, not fear. And this is how my baby had to be born.
Yes. And a lot of people too, like I had 2 C-sections. And when I tell people that, I'm like, yo, my second birth, oh my God, it was so amazing. Like, I love it. It was so pure. It was the best thing ever. Like, you know, and they're like, oh yeah, a C-section, you know, C-sections get a bad rep. And of course there are risks with them, of course, but you can still have an empowered birth with a C-section. As people ask me all the time, like, oh, you had a birth doula, and you still had to have a C-section. I was like, yes. And you can still have that support. Like I still needed her support up until that moment. But so Tiffany, we're talking a lot about these crazy kids, and Tiffany doesn't have any children of her own, but Tiffany is the village auntie. So I want you to give us your village auntie birth story because I have been dying to hear it and I'm like super excited.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well, yes, I have 4 godchildren. You'll hear me refer to them. I feel like they're my kids. They stay in my pocketbook. But
listen, do you need a 5th? Because here I am.
I told my best friend, my godmom tubes are tied. I need y'all to stop having kids. But I was actually not at any of their births for various reasons. Baby showers and all that, you know, I was around, but just not at the births. So the first birth that I ever saw, I was 19 years old. I was in college and I had not started my nursing classes yet. I was a sophomore in school, but I went to school very close to where my older sister lives. And that's actually the reason I went there. I wanted to be close to her and her husband. So went to San Jose State. She already had a child. And so I went to school knowing that, hey, I can help them with the baby. He was born just about a year and a half or so before I started school. So when I'm a sophomore now, she finds out she's pregnant again. So, you know, we're excited, getting everything ready. And I was on my way to work. I was catching the train to Palo Alto. And my uncle actually called and said, hey, Tanya went into labor. I'm like, oh, snap. Okay. So it might've been her husband that called. And I said, let me get off the train. I literally got off at whatever the next station was, walked across the tracks to get back on and go back the opposite way. So got to the hospital where she was having the baby and went in there. And, you know, she was pretty early in labor, but she was in active labor. And her midwife. She was at a hospital that used midwives. So her midwife happened to be in the room at one point when I was in there. And she said, oh, this is my sister. She's in nursing school. And the midwife was like, oh, really? I said, yeah. And she was like, well, we can put you to work. And I was like, oh, okay. So, didn't pay that any mind really, but had told her I actually went to school because I want to become a midwife. Because at the time I did. She's like, yeah, we could put you to work. So, kept being there with my sister as she's going through the labor process, but it was kind of taking a long time. And so I actually left the hospital because that day I was going to look at an apartment. I was getting ready to move out of my on-campus apartment, get my own apartment. So went to look at this apartment, took the tour, loved it, went back to the rental office, signed the lease, and they were like, come on back, she's about to have the baby. So I was like, okay. So, I jump in my car, go back to the hospital, and here she is in transition. And I had never seen anything like this before. And she's fine with me telling you because she tell you herself. But, I thought she was mean, right? So her husband is standing on one side of her on the side of the bed. I'm standing on the other side of the bed. And I'm fanning her and he's trying to like rub her arm and like, it's okay. Just breathe. Just, and she kept saying, don't touch me. Don't touch me. Get away from me. And then she would go, Tiffany, can you give me some ice? Tiffany, can you just rub my head? Can you just, whatever. And I was like, yeah, I'm not your husband. Why are you treating him like that? I just thought that was funny. So I'm taking all this in because it's the first time I've ever seen anything like this in real life. And the baby is getting ready to come. And she was actually on a gurney. I'm not sure if they had like rooms that were full or what happened, but I remember her being on a gurney, not in a bed, and the side rails were still up. And so there was no bed to break or anything, but the midwife came in and she was like, okay, it's time. And she said, get her some gloves. And I was like, oh, this lady's serious. And so the nurses gave me gloves and she told me, you stand right here. And as the baby was crowning, my nephew was coming out. She was like, let me get his head out. And once she checked to make sure there was no nuchal cord or anything, she was like, okay, come over here. And she put my hands in the right place. And she let me like pull him out. And so my sister tells this story of like, my little sister delivered my baby. And I'm like, that's not actually how it happened. But you can tell people that, okay. And so that was just a really special moment for me. And I felt like me and my nephew, he's 21 now, but I feel like we almost had a special bond because of that. Like when he was really little, I could quiet him down when nobody else could, or, just little things like that want to come to me. And I thought it was so cool. And like you, Courtney, we have a video. So I guess it was my brother-in-law who was doing the taping, because I wasn't doing it, but somebody was taping all this and everything is there. My sister in all her glory, and you can see it all. And she is so strange. Tanya, I love you, but you're strange. She will have people come over and be like, you want to see this video of my sister deliver my baby? Let me show you this video. I think it's strange. I've had boyfriends that I brought over to her house to introduce to her, and she's like, let me show you this video. And at one point I was like,
my video, I watched my video one time.
Oh no, it's like a thing.
I don't even know where it is. I need to at least find it so it doesn't end up on the internet.
Today, they will pull that video out if I go over there today. And like when the boys got to the point where they were, 11, 12, 13, I was like, okay, stop. This is enough. This is embarrassing for them at this point. But yeah, that's my birth story. And if I ever have a birth story of my own, I will for sure share it here on this podcast. But I enjoyed listening to y'all's.
It was like your super birth story, like your birth story into like you know what I mean, like into the labor and delivery field, like, and not just that, but like a village auntie was born. So I always call people, like, I'm big on a village, right? And your village can be whoever it is you have, and it could be people you pay, right? People pay nannies or support people, but it can also be your friends. It doesn't necessarily have to be your family. And so every time, like tomorrow, at the time we're recording this, tomorrow is Mother's Day. And I definitely plan on shouting out my village aunties, because even I have a lot of friends who don't have children, but like the way they pour into me and my family, oh my gosh, I have one good friend. Her name is Takia. I've known her since high school, been friends, Facebook, we stay friends, college, all that good stuff. And I remember like when she found that I was pregnant, she was just so overjoyed for me. And just the way she has poured into my son, like it's really like your aunt Takia, you know what I mean? And it's like, not just because you don't have, physical children that came out of your body, like that doesn't mean that you are not a part of this village and of raising this children. Because let me tell you something, you cannot do it without a village. I got two of them today. It is hard. And I'm sure, Courtney, you can attest to that.
Yes.
Well,
yes.
thank
And we
you
live
for that.
away from our family. So it is always just me and my husband. We don't get a break unless we pay for it. But I feel like that's so important, I mean, so it's not often that we get a break because, again, kids are expensive. But I do feel like it's important to try to prioritize making that time to get away. Because, yeah, it takes a village.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you don't have one, trying to find that as best you can. And even if it's not like a physical village, right? Like Nichelle and I in our group chats, we always in there venting about the husbands, the kids, just our lives, work, everything. And so even just that makes me feel not alone, right? My husband acting crazy, Des acting crazy, these kids be kidding, like Nichelle said, and, their kids be kidding too. So, even though I may not have a physical village, the online village is definitely saves me a lot.
Listen, and then we can send them to their rich aunties like Tiffany and stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
And now she in Dallas too. Listen,
and y'all have all the energy. I don't know where y'all get it from. Bless
We
you.
ain't got kids.
Bottle some of that energy and send it back to. Listen, just put some in a diaper bag with the kids, because I just be like, oh my gosh, like they're my friends who don't have kids and the kids be with them. I just be like, y'all just so important. This is amazing. I just said to y'all, this is amazing.
I have another friend. She'd be like, all right, I'm about to go take a nap. I'm like, a nap? What's that? Huh? You doing what?
Exactly.
Well, ladies, it was wonderful listening to your stories. For our listeners, we would love to hear some of y'all's birth stories. So
yes,
out on social media. We are on, oh my gosh, all the things. We're on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook and TikTok and LinkedIn at Just Between Uterus. You can find us on all of those platforms. Our website is justbetweenuterus.com. Reach out to us. Let us hear about your birth stories. Feel free to ask us questions, and we'll be back soon to talk to y'all again.
Yes,
talk
thank
to
you for
later.
listening.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Just Between Uterus podcast. Please like, subscribe, and share with your friends.
We want to hear from you. Follow us on social media at Just Between Uterus.
And email us at info@justbetweenuterus.com.
Bye.
Bye.
Don't put that in there. Don't put that in there.